Right.
It is one of the most iconic pieces of music in the franchise, in part because of its use in this scene, although it goes all the way back to the very second episode. Whenever this music kicks in, you know it's go time for the Straw Hats, and for me personally, it has become the song I sing whenever I'm feeling just a little rebellious. How does Overtaken stir such feelings in myself and I'd venture other One Piece fans? Let's dive into the music to find out. On the surface, Overtaken is an incredibly simple piece of music. It begins with several ostinatos and drums and other percussion instruments that continue through the duration of the piece. This is followed by a catchy marcato melody traded around instruments. That melody is the singable part of the piece, the sort of call to battle melody, if you will. It's a classic heroic sort of melody with a strong downbeat, accented pitches, and loud brass instruments. Not a lot of those perfect intervals I've talked about in heroic themes before, but as we'll see in the context of the show, Overtaken doesn't necessarily function in the same way that a stereotypically heroic melody might. What I find most interesting in this opening section is the lack of harmony. The instruments are in unison here, technically octaves, which really pounds the melody home, since there is nothing else going on but the percussion ostinatos that have already been established for a few measures, which draws the listener's attention solely to the melody. This very opening does not have the entire melody as it appears later. We hear the first four measures before a little instrumental break. In this break, there is accompaniment from a pedal tone in piano and low strings, emphasizing the note A. Other than that, there are no real harmonies. And above that pedal point are little hits in various instruments. I wouldn't really call this portion a melody, more transitionary material. And after four measures of this, the low strings lead us back into those first four measures of the initial melody. After a mostly staccato marcato piece up to this point, the violins give a contrasting legato tune with the return of the A pedal point. Other than the pedal point, there still isn't much to go off of to establish a key. We could maybe say a Dorian, with the presence of F sharps in the violin melody, although I'm not sure what this D sharp is doing here, other than creating chromatic motion outside of the key. The lack of a steady key seems to add to the feel of the piece, though, which relies mostly on rhythms and articulations to set the mood, sans harmony. A set of steady 16th notes, which is the most movement we've had up to this point, leads back into the initial melody. Here, the melody is still in unison, but it is expanded using a sequential pattern. Also of note is another added syncopation in the lowest brass, low strings, and piano. All of this builds more tension. In my other One Piece video, I mentioned how music for TV is often written in such a way that it can be cut in many places, so a particular musical cue can be used in multiple instances, even if the length of the visuals is different. We'll see that play out in the included Overtaken clips later in this video. This idea of the same melody with different levels of hype makes a lot of sense for the context of a TV show. Depending on how long the cue is can determine which portions of the music get used. If it's longer, the full build can be used. But if it's shorter, this type of musical writing makes it possible to jump in at the middle of the build-up and still have that payoff at the end of the cue. Anyways, back to the music. We do start to get chords in this section. This transcription, linked in the description, identifies the following chords: D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, D minor 7, A minor, G over A, F over A, and E minor 7. I think the chords are more used for the upwards stepwise motion than any functional harmony. This is followed by a little motive in the low strings and a hit from what I learned is called a Vibraslap. It's that shaker-sounding thing that fills the gaps between melodies throughout Overtaken. This thing. And that takes us into another new melody. This new melody is very disjunct with a lot of 16th notes and again that A pedal point. Between the 16th note melody in the strings are interjections from mostly brass instruments and one of those Vibraslap hits again. We have this timpani roll too and an additional percussion ostinato added underneath this portion as well, creating a thicker texture. The whole section is a lot of trading of motives, which I find very compelling. Eventually, a longer 16th note run that is very chromatic takes us back to the final full iteration of the initial melody. The final repeat of that marcato melody has the thickest texture yet. Again, that idea of building up to the climax of the piece. The climax being a unison repeat of the first two measures of the main theme. If Overtaken is thought of in technical musical terms, it defies categorization. Really, if you want to put it into a classical form, it's technically a rondo. It presents a melody, goes somewhere else, presents the same melody, goes somewhere else, and then presents that same melody again. But it certainly doesn't sound anything like what one would expect from a classical rondo. It also largely avoids melodic content in those in-between sections. It's really more a bunch of random phrases being traded around. And the general lack of harmonies is also an avoidance of any kind of traditional key center. In addition to the practical reasons why the piece might be written this way, to me, the piece itself feels like an act of rebellion. This seems by design, since it is so often used when pirates are defying someone, be it the government, other pirates, or any other enemy. Of course, the music wouldn't mean nearly as much without the associations presented by the show, so let's look at some of those next. If you've been with my channel a while, you may have noticed I gravitate towards heroic melodies. Maybe I should have been a brass player, I don't know. Everything about this orchestration, from the brass to the percussion, especially snare drum, and the emphasis on beat one, and the marcato style of the playing screams a heroic type march. There are some deviations from what you might expect. We largely avoid perfect intervals, for instance, and the melody is more broken up than one would expect from a typical heroic melody. Still, rather than "the hero has arrived," Overtaken to me feels more like a marching into action, and maybe that has to do with the associations of the music in the show. Also, the fact that Luffy is adamant he isn't a hero, because then he would have to share his meat, is another reason Overtaken feels less heroic and more rebellious. Either the director of the anime decided this music would fit those kinds of scenes because of its sound, or me, the longtime viewer, associated it with those ideas because of the scenes it was used in. Really, both of those things can be true, it just depends on where you yourself fit into the chain of events, which is how music and meaning can get tricky. But let's not go further down into that rabbit hole. If anyone wants to hurt their brain, I have recommended reading. So what are some of those most iconic uses of the Overtaken theme? Shout out to some Reddit posts and a YouTube playlist I found, all linked in the description, because I didn't know where to start other than a full one-piece rewatch to find out where each instance of Overtaken occurred. I did not use all of the instances fans mentioned, but picked several I thought were a good representation of how the theme is used throughout the show, starting with pre-time skip instances. I also want to note for this section, I will give a warning about each arc before it starts, so that if you're not completely caught up, you can skip ahead and not have any spoilers. We'll begin with the iconic walk up to Arlong Park. Luffy says, "Let's go," and the guys are ready, just sitting around waiting for the command. They don't run, they walk. As the music continues, there is a lot of dialogue throughout this scene that I always forget about because what really sticks out to me is the boys walking. And to be fair, the climax of Overtaken comes when it switches back to them. Through the scene, a few of the earlier sections of the music are repeated because it is quite a long cue, and that way the final unison of those first two measures arrives as Luffy breaks through the wall to Arlong's fortress.
Let's go.
Right. Hey, are you guys all right? Did Arlong do this to you?
Move aside. We have business to take care of with the fishmen.
When we finally hear and challenge him.
Yeah, then we lost, but only by a hair.
I'm sorry, but I can't let you through this door. You have no chance of victory.
What's that?
I'd bet my life on it.
But why would they come to defend our village?
If those men can't handle Arlong and his gang, then there really is no hope. Not only for this island, but for the whole East Blue.
Step aside!
Zoro, they seem too weak for that. They weren't even worth killing.
That's for sure.
Moving on to episode 239. This is the Frankie family house walk-up, which is very similar to Arlong Park in that the boys are walking up to beat up on someone that hurt one of their crewmates. The biggest difference being since Usopp was the one hurt, Chopper joins the monster trio in this epic walk. This scene has some very artistic editing. As each Straw Hat recalls a memory of Usopp, you get to see his feet come into the frame until all four of the boys are marching together on the Frankie family for vengeance. Now on to episode 277. There might be a pattern here. We have one more walk-up because my girl Robin. Here the Straw Hats are marching on the world government itself into Eni's lobby to save their crewmate, even though she insisted she didn't want to be saved. The scene pans across each crew member's face until it lands on Luffy as he says, "Leave the rest to us," as the music concludes. At this point, Overtaken could be called the walk-up music. This is a very selective sample of uses, but I'd argue some of the most memorable uses, both because of the importance to the plot and for the simple fact that fans thought to include them in lists of times Overtaken was played. These early key moments help to give the theme that time to get shit done association. Before we move on to post-time skip uses, I want to highlight the very first instance of Overtaken. Although Arlong Park may be the first time a lot of people really notice the music, it first appears in the very second episode, and the context is actually pretty similar. Luffy leaps into action in front of the firing squad trying to execute Zoro. After repelling the bullets, Overtaken plays. It is just the main melody in this instance, which makes me wonder if the rest was actually written at a later time for a longer cue. I have no idea. Either way, the idea of Luffy throwing himself into danger for his crewmates to the music Overtaken holds fast from this very first instance, even if Zoro is not yet officially part of the crew.
See ya! That won't work on me! Told you I was strong!
What the? Who the hell are you?
My name's Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm gonna be king of the pirates!
I mentioned earlier how I don't think of Overtaken as the hero has arrived, but here it kind of is. Even if Luffy doesn't want to be a hero, he did just save the life of an acquaintance without a second thought. But I digress. Let's go back to instances of Overtaken. Moving on to episode 553, which is part of the Fishman Island arc. This is one more epic walk-up, although this time it isn't to save a fellow crewmate, but rather to keep the new Fishman pirates from executing the Rigyu royal family on Fishman Island. Like with the Robin instance, the music ends with Luffy addressing the enemy, and I do wonder, other than the obvious walk-up associations at this point, if the other reason for using Overtaken in this scene is that once again the Straw Hats are marching on the Fishman pirates.
おいおい、これみんな敵なのかよ。
だろうな。ざっと見積もって7、8万、いや10万ってとこか。
よほほほ、そりゃちょっと手厳しい。
なんなら部屋で寝てても構わねえぞ。俺が全部片付ける。
んだとこら。うずうずすんな。麦わらのルフィ、お前らは本当にこの島を滅ぼす気なのか。なぜ竜宮城を占拠した。お前らも王族の命が味方なのか。答えろ麦わら。敵か。お前らが勝手に決めろ。
The other thing worth noting about these walk-ups is all of them are specifically the Straw Hats marching on an enemy. The enemies vary. There are fellow pirates, hooligans, and the world government itself, but always Luffy leads the way, with whoever in the crew is on hand to walk with him. Let's move on now to some different instances of Overtaken. This first one, I'm not sure the exact episode, but it's in the Punk Hazard arc. It's a bit of a gag moment that works really well because of these prior associations. The Straw Hats attack the icy island dwellers on Punk Hazard for the sake of stealing coats so they don't freeze. Overtaken plays here, making it feel like a really serious moment, like in earlier instances, even though the animation and facial expressions suggest it is meant to be taken as a joke. The music keeps going as the Straw Hats decide which coats they want to take from everyone. Instead of epically saving a comrade here, the Straw Hats are saving themselves while the rebellion music plays. As one commenter pointed out, it is one of the only times they actually act like pirates.
Where did those wretched pirates go?
Right here! This is a pleasant surprise, Brooke.
It's so good to see you all! Who knew running from that terrifying ghost would lead me directly to where you were?
But this damn weather, that's another thing. I can't cut that with my sword.
It's freezing. I can barely walk.
I told you guys, don't...
Good thinking, Robin. I call the fourth guy from the right.
Yeah, nice one. I'll take the guy next to him. All right, now let me see. The girl on the far left will do nicely.
Those coats look nice and warm.
All right, good idea. But please give me one, too.
On to episode 595, which is still in the Punk Hazard arc. This is a sort of variation on the walk-up idea. In this case, it's a fall-in from Luffy, Robin, and Frankie. The music here seems to call back to those earlier walk-up instances, even though Luffy and crew make a very different entrance. Still, despite not walking, Luffy once again declares his intention to beat the enemy that is standing right in front of him.
いい近道だった。
あのバカ。誰が全軍相手にしろと言った？
どこだ、マスター！出てこい！
Now, one more Punk Hazard instance that is actually really different. I'm not sure the episode number on this one either. After being caught off guard, Zoro recalls what they went through to get to the New World, realizing they're all playing in the big leagues now. Here the music almost fits its name, as the crew was overtaken in a sense. Zoro takes the moment to tell Luffy he needs to get a grip after realizing all the mistakes they made before. In order to survive and be able to continue overtaking enemies, they need to pay more attention now. In some ways, this is still a get shit done instance, just in the sense of we need to pay more attention so we can do things, rather than actively marching up on a specific enemy.
俺たちも雪男に眠らされた。これじゃダメだ。あ？何のための2年だったんだよ。
まあまあ、お互い命あったんだし。
冗談じゃねえ。ルフィ！
とっとと道開けろ。なるほど。
しやがれ！これからだぞ、新世界は！厳しいね、自分に。
This next instance, again, not sure exact episode number, but it's at the end of the Dressrosa arc. Although Overtaken is often used in moments of get shit done, it is also used in moments of victory. For instance, after Luffy defeats Doflamingo, Kyros reflects on his life under Doflamingo and sobs, realizing he's finally free, as Overtaken plays. This is also an interesting use because the focus is not on the Straw Hats. It still relates to them as Luffy's victory over Doflamingo has freed Kyros from tyranny, but the images are focused on Kyros' story. Still, the piece ending with a shot of unconscious Luffy brings back the importance of him liberating others that has been part of Overtaken up to this point.
この国に王に何をした海賊！王が町を焼いたんだ。見ただろう。王はそんなこと断じてしない。 よく見てろ。陸王家統治のドレスローザはキュロスというのか。私と一緒に来い。みんな俺のこと家族を二人も奪われてたまるか。
この日、国の人々は瓦礫の中で喜び泣いた。
And we'll look at one instance in the Wano arc. The theme definitely occurs multiple times in the Wano arc. Here is one that fits with some of those earlier associations. This is after the Straw Hats and allies have infiltrated Kaido's party. Hyuguro points out the endless enemies, but also how he feels they won't lose because Luffy is with them. Considering all the other times Luffy won right after this music plays, it's a safe bet. Then as the music continues, we do have members of the crew walking up, all getting ready to take down Kaido.
相変わらず周りは敵だらけ。なのになんだろうな。負ける気がしねえんだ。
確かに。そういやそうだ。
不思議だね。
ひとっ飛びだと思ったんだけどな。くそ、甘くねえな。
俺も行く。上だな、とにかく。
厄介だな。あいつら全部飛行能力者か。
翼をもぎ取ればただの毛虫よ。
いや怖えな。相変わらず例えが
よいやー、あれが噂に聞く大看板ですか。
行くぞ船長。
おう、もう一回だ。行くぞ。みんな他は任せる。援護頼む。俺はカイドウをぶっ倒しに行く。
Overtaken notably isn't used when Luffy, Law, Kid, Zoro, and Killer walk up to Kaido. I'd have to rewatch the show to know for sure, but it seems like based on these key moments at least, the music is more associated specifically with epic walk-ups from the Straw Hats, not just anyone, and not some of the Straw Hats with other people. This is a pretty small sample size, but from these instances, when Overtaken plays, someone is about to get liberated, or was just liberated by Luffy. Which ties into another newer theme, which is also musically related to Overtaken, but I'll save that for a future video. Overtaken is a relatively simple piece of music, with repetitive percussion ostinatos, a fairly simple melody, and some creative uses of orchestration. It's a march that isn't really a march, with the recurring theme that has become the sound of rebellion. A lot of times when this plays, someone is about to get freed, and Luffy and crew are the ones to do it. So if you're on Luffy's side, play this music loud and proud as you walk into a freer future. And if you're not on Luffy's side, first off, why are you here? But also, you better watch yourself when those drums kick in. I am curious what your favorite instance of Overtaken is, and what are some of the instances you remember that I may have missed. Let me know in the comments, and let me know if there's any other music from One Piece that you'd like me to cover in future videos. Thank you all so much for watching. Hey, so one more really quick random thing. If you like One Piece, I've been playing Tomodachi Life and turning it into One Piece. It's Laugh-Tale Island. I've taken a lot of clips, and I'm gonna plan on continuing to post them, both as shorts here on YouTube and over on my Instagram at justpressplay6849, which is also linked in the description. So if that's something that interests you, it's a lot of fun. They get into a lot of shenanigans. It's also just really random. Give me a follow over there and a subscribe here on YouTube. I hope you enjoy the random little videos as much as I do.